Yes, my friends, things are already heating up around the Baltimore Ravens, and we need to talk about something that could have a huge impact on this season. We all know Lamar Jackson and Derrick Henry can completely take over a football game, but none of that becomes easier if the offensive line cannot protect Lamar or create space for Henry. And after what we just saw, Ravens fans finally have a big reason to believe that one of last season's biggest problems could become one of this team's biggest improvements. Daniel Falele is now in New York, and Baltimore has moved in a different direction at right guard. After watching Venawayne against the Philadelphia Eagles, the difference immediately got people talking. Even Brian Baldinger was impressed by the physicality he showed, while Shannon Sharpe went on a wild rant about Falele and what Baltimore dealt with at that position. So I want to know which side you're on. Do you believe Venawayne can really become the answer at right guard and make life easier for Lamar Jackson and Derrick Henry? Or do you still need to see much more before trusting this offensive line? Write your opinion in the comments. And if you've been a Baltimore Ravens fan for more than 15 years, hit that like button hard. Also write, "Go Ravens. We're going to the Super Bowl." All right, Ravens flock. Let's talk about Venawayne and why this change at right guard could be much bigger than people realize. Now, Ravens flock, we have to start with Shannon Sharpe because he absolutely went after Daniel Falele. And when I say he went after him, I mean he did not hold back. Falele is now in New York, so this is not about pretending he is still part of Baltimore's plans. He isn't. The reason this matters to the Ravens today is because Baltimore has moved on at right guard. And after watching the first preseason game against the Philadelphia Eagles, the difference at that position was impossible to ignore. While talking about the Giants and Vikings preseason game, Sharpe brought up Falele and basically questioned how someone that big could struggle so much as a blocker. He even joked that Lamar Jackson might have been willing to give up $10 million just to see Baltimore move on from him. Obviously, that was a joke. There's nothing in the information we have that suggests Lamar actually said anything like that. But the football point behind Sharpe's rant is what Ravens fans should pay attention to. Falele started at right guard for Baltimore for 2 full 17-game seasons, and according to the discussion, the improvement simply never arrived in the way Baltimore needed. Last season especially, the problems on the offensive line contributed to uncomfortable situations for Lamar Jackson, and this needs to be said clearly. Falele was not responsible for every offensive problem Baltimore had. Football does not work that way. Andrew Voorhees was also mentioned as part of an offensive line that simply did not get the job done consistently enough. There were other issues. There were other players involved. There were injuries. There were problems throughout the offense. But right guard was clearly one of the areas Baltimore desperately needed to improve. That is why watching Venawayne against Philadelphia felt so different. There was a moment where he had nobody directly in front of him to block. Instead of standing around and watching the play, he went looking for work. He found an Eagles defensive lineman and put him on the ground. That might sound like one small preseason play. It wasn't. That play showed exactly the type of attitude Baltimore appears to want from this offensive line. Find somebody, hit somebody, finish the play. And that physical mentality kept showing up. Venawayne was standing defenders up. He was keeping players from getting past him. He looked comfortable with his assignments. And when he had an opportunity to help somebody else, he went looking for that opportunity. That is the kind of offensive line play that can change an entire offense. Think about Lamar Jackson for a moment. Everybody knows what Lamar can do when a play breaks down. He can escape pressure, extend plays, and turn what looks like a disaster into something special. But that does not mean Baltimore should force him to play that way. Lamar can operate from the pocket. He can go through his progressions. He can deliver the football when the protection gives him enough time. The problem last season was that the pocket could collapse too quickly. Now imagine Lamar looking to his right and trusting that the guard beside him is going to hold his ground. That changes things. It gives Lamar another fraction of a second to read the defense. It gives receivers more time to develop their routes. It gives the entire passing game an opportunity to work the way it was designed to work. And then there is Derrick Henry. Here is one of the most interesting points from the entire discussion. Henry has never played behind a Baltimore offensive line without Falele starting. Falele's first season as a starter was 2024. That was also Henry's first season in Baltimore. So every Baltimore rushing attempt we have seen from Henry has come with Falele as part of that starting offensive line. Now that changes. And Shannon Sharpe joked that Henry might run for 2,000 yards, now that Baltimore's former right guard is in New York. Again, nobody should take that as a prediction or guarantee. But think about what an upgrade at right guard could mean for a runner like Henry. He already brings overwhelming power. He already forces defenses to respect him. If Baltimore can create cleaner running lanes and get more movement at the line of scrimmage, Henry becomes even more difficult to deal with. And the beautiful part is that improving the offensive line does not only help Henry, it helps everybody. This is why the argument about using a major draft investment on an offensive lineman matters so much. Offensive line selections are rarely considered exciting. Fans naturally get excited about wide receivers, cornerbacks, and pass rushers because those players produce the highlights everybody sees. But how do you get those highlights? Your quarterback needs protection. Your running back needs space.
Your receivers need enough time to run their routes. The offensive line makes all of that possible. And against Philadelphia, Vinawayne gave Ravens fans their first real glimpse of what that improvement could look like. Brian Baldinger certainly noticed it. Baldinger broke down the film and sounded extremely impressed by what he saw. On one play, he described Vinawayne taking a nose tackle for a ride before looking for another defender to hit. Then another. Baldinger eventually gave him a perfect description. There is a new bouncer in town in Baltimore. That tells you everything about the style we saw. Physical. Aggressive. Always looking for more work. And Vinawayne himself explained that mentality after the game. He talked about how important physicality is to the offensive line room and said that this is the identity they are trying to establish. His personal goal is simple: keep playing until he hears the whistle. Ravens fans, that sounds like Baltimore football. And maybe that is why this performance felt so refreshing. It was not only about whether a block was technically successful. It was about the attitude behind it. Baltimore looked like a team trying to establish an identity again. The offensive line wants to be physical. The defense wants to be physical. The entire team played with an aggression that was noticeable against Philadelphia. Baldinger also highlighted Vinawayne's pass protection. His point was basically that if the young guard can set himself, keep his defender around the line of scrimmage and help when he is free, Lamar Jackson will take care of the rest. That is exactly the relationship Baltimore needs. The offensive line does not need to perform magic. Give Lamar a pocket. Give him time. Let him throw. We have seen what happens when Lamar feels comfortable. The idea that he cannot throw from the pocket simply does not match what he has shown. When he can stand there, go through his progressions and trust the protection around him, he can deliver the football with anybody. That makes what is happening at right guard much bigger than one rookie having a good preseason game. This could affect the entire offense. And there is another part of this story that I think Ravens fans should appreciate. Vinawayne looks confident. He does not look like someone who is overwhelmed by the moment. The coaching staff and his teammates had already talked about how mature he looked, almost like a veteran.